Welcome back. Session number 26. We left off right in the middle of letter number 44. And we're going to dive right back in. So this is the third and final installment of the cosmological teachings. No.
That's right.
Yes.
One of the heavy ones, and yet it's getting more and more comprehensible, believe it or not.
Yeah.
It may not seem that way, but go back and watch it a couple of times, especially in the future. Go take a look at it a week from now, maybe, and after you've been thinking about some of these things, you might be surprised at how much you are picking up on it.
That is actually a good point. And off camera, Terry and I talk about this a lot. We and you, if you want to, really need to go back over the material. And I know these videos are long and we have many videos, but you absorb it so much more when you go back and rewatch and reread. For example, you're in a different place, and at nighttime when you sleep, things change. When you meditate, things change. And just hearing it again with fresh ears a different day, you'll absorb more. So that is a good practice. I know there are a lot of these videos to watch, but
because of all the post-production work that we do and the preparation for the following video, I have probably watched each one of them a minimum of 4 times, if not 5. And every time I notice something new that, even though we're recording it, I still learn from it, believe it or not.
Oh, we always learn from teaching, always. All right, so recall that these are Sinnett's statements / questions to Moria.
And let's give just a really quick recap of where we got to up to this point. It has to do with the 7 spheres. Remember?
I can put it on the screen.
It has to do with the 7 spheres, starting with A all the way through to G, which is A and G being at the same level of just beneath pure spirit. And D, the only one that is by itself on one level, being our physical manifestation on this earth in this case. And he's discussing creation, what is called creation in the Bible and in many traditions, but in essence is evolution and how it occurs, starting with the mineral kingdom, which has to develop completely around all of the spheres. Then the plant life begins and does the same thing, and then animal life, and then finally humans. So this is all the cycle of the Ouroboros, positive and negative. Whenever we come out of a pralaya, we have manifestation, which starts with this shiver of energy that goes through all of space and animates it and gets it started again for a new period of experience. And he points out that in each one of these, what he is calling spheres, it's not a different location. It's a different level of consciousness, a different type of awareness. So don't think that they're positional. They're not. They're relational, but they're not in a particular location.
It could be considered different dimensions when we think of the emotional or astral realm or the mental realm, sort of like that.
Right, exactly. And another thing we pointed out is that nothing is ever lost, ever. We think of death as a loss. It is not. We operated in a borrowed body, so to speak, for a period of time. And when that period of experience is finished, we relinquish it and it goes back to where it started, which is the earth. Our life force goes back to the equivalent of the universal life force, and so on. Our astral body, the body of desires, goes back to the equivalent in the universal pattern.
That's not that hard to grasp, because if you think about a physical body going in the ground with dirt, eventually it'll disintegrate. And what happens? It literally and physically gets reabsorbed in a way. If insects are eating it and reproduce or processing it through, or if it just changes into dirt itself. Imagine your emotional body. If you could imagine the astral world, a ball of emotions just kind of dissipating back into the surrounding emotional environment. And it's all emotions. Our emotional body was a focal point, condensed focal point of energy that then dissipates. It's the same kind of thing with the mind and with the soul. Going back to universal soul, it's the same thing.
Everything gets recycled. Nature is not wasteful at all.
Right.
Everything gets repurposed, recycled. The physical atoms in my body were probably in some other body at one point. And then when that body disintegrated, plants grew. And I may have eaten a bean last night that was part of somebody's body 18 years ago. I don't know.
When we were learning about these concepts in school, kids would used to joke, when you drink water, you're drinking dinosaur pee.
And that's exactly right. That's funny what kids come up with.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were saying something else.
Nothing gets wasted. Everything is recycled, including experience. As we pointed out, every human has the sum total of all experience that was gained in the mineral kingdom, in the plant kingdom, and in the animal kingdom previously. That does not go away. It does not disappear. And even when you think about reincarnation, you can think of yourself not as the reincarnation of a former person, but as having inherited all of the experience of that person. So whoever you were in a previous lifetime, you haven't lost any of that experience. You still have a complete connection with that higher self, with the spiritual part of your nature. That's where everything carries over from one incarnation to another. You are the recipient of everything that previous incarnation did. Whether it's positive or negative, it's all good because it's all learning experience. If that individual made mistakes, you get to inherit the karma that comes from those mistakes, and you get to contribute your part of the learning process for whatever the next incarnation is for that soul.
It's a fascinating topic. We could talk all session about that.
Could.
And I have more to add, but I'm going to zip it because we're going to get back to our to our questions here.
A couple of quick things. Love and hatred, we learned, are the biggest motivators in life. Doesn't matter if it's physical, astral, on the spiritual level, there's this attraction and repulsion. Those are the biggest impulses that move life forward. We also learned that consciousness is in a period of growth. It always expands. It doesn't go backwards. And nature provides the appropriate forms depending on what the threshold of consciousness has reached at that particular point in this evolutionary process. If it has completed the animal cycle, then the consciousness is ready for something else. And so nature has to evolve human animals. And we'll find that there is a transition period from animals to humans as far as physical bodies. It has to evolve in order to accommodate this expanded consciousness. So those two move hand in hand, expansion of consciousness and the vehicle necessary to express that so we can gain more experience. We talked also about connectivity and poor orphan humanity, the fact that we are the most isolated of all creatures on this earth. Plants, animals, they are far more interconnected. And we talked about the schools of fish, the flocks of birds, who are in tune with each other. They move as a group. And how humanity is completely separate at this point, or at least it appears that way. Yet in the future, we will be more like the Mahatmas, who are in tune with all of the other Mahatmas, with higher members of the hierarchy, and with their own chelas. They have a network. And whenever one of them needs information on a specific topic, they simply tune into the brain or the mind of the person who knows the most about it, who is part of their network. And they have immediate access to that information. This is a siddhi. These are the powers that these individuals we refer to as Mahatmas have gained. All right, now I think we're ready to move forward. So Paul is reading the statement/questions of Sinnett, and then I will read the responses from Moria.
All right, picking up with question number 5 out of 7. So we're about halfway through this letter. Sinnett says, where does it get the animal soul, its fifth principle, from? Has the potentiality of this resided from the first in the original magnetic impulse which constituted the mineral, or at every transition from the last world on the ascending side to sphere 1? Does it, so to speak, pass through an ocean of spirit and assimilate some new principle?
And Moria's response, his fifth principle, which is the higher manas.
Sinnett referred to it as the animal soul, but that word is confusing. It's the soul, the human soul. I don't know why it's called animal.
It's called animal soul because that is the lower soul.
Okay.
It is the Atma.
Not the Paramatma.
Not the Paramatma, sure. Exactly.
Yes,
so
our individual soul.
We evolved from the consciousness of animals into human, but we're still not completely in tune with spirituality. In fact, we've lost that connection. Animals are more in tune with their higher self, so to speak, than we are.
Many of you might be more familiar with the word Purusha, and Purusha can actually refer to the Paramatma and the Atma, but Purusha means soul, more or less. So Sinnett is asking, where does this individualized Purusha come from? And
he says, it is evolved from within himself. Man having, as you well know, the potentiality of all the 7 principles as a germ. From the very instant he appears in the first world of causes as a shadowy breath, which consolidates with and is hardened together with the parent sphere. Spirit or life is indivisible. Spirit, being the 7th principle, is indivisible. And when we speak of the 7th principle, it is not quality or quantity or even form that is meant, but rather the space occupied in that ocean of spirit by the results or effects impressed thereon. These results are beneficent, as are all those of a co-worker with nature.
That's eloquent.
It's very eloquent.
That's a huge teaching right there.
Yes.
That little statement is like a sutra of massive wisdom.
Yes. And when he talks about the ocean of spirit, that it's indivisible, this is what he's talking about. So one explanation that I've heard that makes sense to me is it is indivisible, and yet in the ocean, everything mixes, everything is cohesive, homogeneous, and yet you can have an area that shows something different. We can refer to a whirlpool.
Or an area that's higher salination content, or an area of warmer or cooler water, and yet it's all the same body of water.
Right. All of these variations that merge and shift, and we can see phenomena within that group.
There's another simple analogy. Think about a raindrop that falls from a cloud onto a mountainside. That raindrop may eventually join a little stream, and then that stream may join a river. That drop is still there, right? And the river may go all the way down to the ocean. And the drop that took a journey, it somehow go long in the past. That drop didn't start as a drop. It started right where it was, probably at the beginning. It evaporated, formed a cloud, traveled, fell as rain in a mountain, and went through this gigantic prodigal son type journey and slipped back into the ocean.
And it was never separate from it, but it appeared to be. So that's the Maya.
If you only look at the physical world with your physical eyes, the drop of water seems separate, clearly. Clouds up there, oceans down there, they're separate, but that's only in the physical realm.
Right.
We're not considering the fact that we have other deeper aspects of ourselves that are not separate. The physical world looks separate for a reason. And he just explained that in like a very eloquent paragraph.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
No, but like I said, we are getting more and more understanding as we go along.
Spirit or life is indivisible. We're all one.
Yes.
And when we speak of the seventh principle, which is pure spirit, it's not quality or quantity or even form. Yeah, there's no, at the highest level of life, of divinity, there isn't any body. There isn't a sex or a gender, right? It's all just, he calls it an ocean. That's
And when we talk about everyone being one, treating all humanity as yourself, not just humanity, but animals, plants, all of nature as being you. You are nature itself. You are, if you want to call it God, you are God.
I like it. The other thing, Terry, we should just shine a light on is how he says these results are beneficent. He's talking about the absorption of all experience in the physical world. But why do some experiences seem traumatic and hateful and hard and ugly? Well, if you look at those experiences in the grand scheme of everything in the universe, there are lessons learned, and that's the beneficent part, which is the only part that's absorbed. You don't remember your past lives because the details don't matter. The ugliness and the tumultuous things that you went through to get to the lessons learned are not important. The fact is that the lesson was learned, and that's the beneficent thing that is maintained in this, in God's ocean.
Yes. Yes, exactly. All right. Are we ready for number 6?
We like to talk a lot if you didn't notice. They might not have noticed that, but now I think they're realizing.
I bet they noticed it from the beginning.
All right, question 6. From the highest animal form in sphere 1, which we can take to mean human form.
Highest animal? No, he's talking about animals.
Still animals, okay, animals, actual
he
animals.
goes back and forth, so we have to be careful of that.
All right.
He's now going back to animal and explaining how that transforms into human.
Okay. Before I continue, when we say highest, remember we've mentioned Darwinian evolution, survival of the fittest. An amoeba can do less than a gazelle can. A gazelle can be considered higher in the sense that it can interact with its environment more than a little amoeba or a worm can. So that's what we mean when we talk about higher forms. But there's the spiritual evolutionary progress that's happening in tandem with the physical. And the consciousness of a gazelle is also greater than the consciousness of a worm. And the consciousness of a gazelle is aware that it can do more with its environment. So that's evolving also. but he's specifically saying form. So from the highest animal form in sphere 1, how does it get to sphere 2? And sphere 2 would arguably afford more forms, but we'll see. So how does it go from sphere 1 to sphere 2? It is inconceivable that it can descend to the lowest animal form there, meaning in sphere 2. But otherwise, how can it go through the whole circle of life on each planet in turn, or each sphere? The animal soul, in its next plunge into the ocean of spirit, acquires the 7th principle, which endows it with a 6th. This determines its future on Earth, and at the close of the Earth life, has sufficient vitality to keep an attraction of its own for the 7th principle, or loses this and ceases to exist as a separate entity.
All right. Now, this is one that Sinnett didn't completely understand. So the first thing Moria said is, all this is misconceived. The 7th principle, meaning Atma, spirit,
Pure spirit.
the 7th principle is always there as a latent force in every one of the principles, even the physical body. Very important to note. As the macrocosmic whole, it is present even in the lowest sphere, but there is nothing there to assimilate it to itself. And then he continues, the highest...
Can I interject 1 second? In other words, the very basic form of nature, rocks and minerals, have spirit. That's what he's saying. But you can't really tell that a rock is spiritual. More like one rock isn't wearing a turban and chanting mantras, and the other rock is doing nothing. But because the rocks don't have the ability to, right? But spirit, he's saying spirit is still there. Continue.
Right. The highest animal form in sphere 1, or A, being irresponsible, there is no degradation for it to merge into sphere 2, or B, as the most infinitesimal of that sphere. Every kingdom, and we have 7 while you have just 3, is subdivided into 7 degrees. Now, when he says you have just 3, he's talking about mineral, vegetable, and animal, because scientists consider humans to be animals. Animals sometimes act better than we do.
Yeah.
Actually, they most of the time do.
Yeah. Yes.
But he's referring to what Paul alluded to in our previous session, where we talked about the fact that the angels evolve on a similar parallel path, and that's what he's alluding to. But because that's outside of our realm, we don't talk that much about it. Each kingdom, and we have 7 while you have just 3, is subdivided into 7 degrees. Man, physically, is a compound of all the kingdoms, and spiritually, his individuality is no worse for being shut up within the casing of an ant than it is for being inside a king. It is not the outward or physical shape that dishonors and pollutes the 5 principles, but the mental perversity. It is only at his 4th round, when he has arrived at the full possession of his kama energy, meaning desire energy, and is completely matured, that the man becomes fully responsible, because at the 6th, he may become a Buddha, and at the 7th, a Dhyan Chohan. So he's saying we, humanity, is currently, we are in the 4th round. First being mineral, 2nd plant, 3rd animal, 4th human. And that by the 6th round, these same individuals can become a Buddha, and by the 7th, a Dhyan Chohan, the highest level of spiritual attainment in our own solar system. So that's what's ahead of us, every one of us. Mineral, plant, animal, man, all of these have to run their 7 rounds during the period of Earth's activity, the Mahayuga.
Does the word round refer to making a cycle of all the
Yes.
spheres?
Yes.
Even though we've been kind of told that the first sphere is not physical, the second sphere.
And there are also rounds on each one. So
that's very, very confusing.
And believe me, it gets convoluted and difficult to understand, but just grasp the general concept. That's plenty good enough. I won't go into detail here on the mineral and plant evolution, but I will just point out that of man, or rather animal man. He starts downward as a simple spiritual entity. So starting on sphere 1A, an unconscious 7th principle, a Parabrahm, as opposed to Parabrahm, with the germs of the other 6 principles lying dormant in him.
We're hearing a new word here. Brahm is a form of Brahma, which is the creator, the overarching divine mind. So we can interchange that with what we were saying earlier, Paramatma, the highest spirit or the highest Brahma. Same
Right.
thing, just because the terms are different.
Parabrahm, meaning the animal soul, as opposed to Parabrahm, meaning the highest spiritual existence. Gathering solidly at every sphere his 6 principles when passing through the worlds of effects and his outward form in the worlds of causes, when he reaches our planet, he is but a glorious bundle of light upon a sphere. It's still itself still pure and undefiled. So when man first appears on Earth, this physical Earth, he is pure and undefiled. He reaches our planet. He is but a glorious bundle of light upon a sphere, itself still pure and undefiled. At that stage, our globe is soft and with undefined features. Now that's interesting. It's mushy. It isn't solid like this.
It could be lava. It could be molten rock.
It could be. And it's still in a solidification process. It's a very, very long process. So the first forms of humanity on this earth were definitely very amorphous and vague. And man is like an atom before the breath of life was breathed into his nostrils.
And that's Adam, like the name, A-D-A-M, not A-T-O-M.
Oh, yes. Yes. So man is like an atom before the breath of life was breathed into his nostrils, to quote your own bungled up scriptures. And all of mythology and religious teachings are a form of mythology, are based on the truth. But over millions of years, hundreds of thousands of years, they get hopelessly distorted. For man and nature, it is the first day, as distortedly described in your Bible. Man number 1 makes his appearance at the apex of the circle of the spheres, on sphere number 1. So that's the first Adam, and we're going to find out there's more than one Adam, believe it or not. But the very first one on sphere 1 is this very vague, nebulous something, but potential of becoming a complete human. After the completion of the 7 rounds or periods of the 2 kingdoms known to you, and thus he is said to be created on the 8th day. All of the other things have been created previously, and then appears the first exposition, the first example of humanity. See Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, wherein Law, the great universal fabricator, is termed God by Christians and Jews and understood as evolution by Kabbalists. So whether you call it nature or whether you call it God, we're talking about the same thing. During this first round, animal man runs, as you say, his cycle in a spiral on the descending arc, where he starts after the completion of the 7th round of animal life on its own individual 7 rounds. He has to enter every sphere, not as a lower animal, as you understand it, but as a lower man, since during the cycle which preceded his round as a man, he performed it as the highest type of animal. So he has already experienced the highest form of animal life on all of the spheres. And now it's his turn to experience this higher level of consciousness as a human being. Your Lord God, says Genesis chapter 1, verses 25 and 26, after having made everything, said, "Let us make man in our own image," and creates man as an androgynous ape, which is extinct on our planet, the highest in intelligence in the animal kingdom, and whose descendants you find in the anthropoids of today. Now, even science recognizes parts of this. They recognize that there was a common ancestor to all animals and to all humans in the far distant past, but that at various times, nature moves forward with a certain prototype, so to speak, and at various times it's decided that that's not working out well, and so that ends, and that generation dies out, and they will try again. Nature tries again until it finds the right combination. And it's not unusual at all for that to happen. Nature doesn't do everything perfectly the first time, just like we are part of nature. If anybody ever made it perfectly the first time through humanity, it doesn't happen. It's not even possible. Like the lower lives and beings during his first, second, and third round, and while he is a compound of pure matter and pure spirit, none of them as yet defiled by the consciousness of their possible purposes and actions from sphere 1, where he has performed his local 7 rounds of evolutionary process from the lowest class of the highest species of, say, anthropoids up to rudimentary man. He enters sphere 2 as an ape, that word being used for your better comprehension. So we're talking about the form, not the consciousness. Sometimes the consciousness gets ahead of the available forms, and that's just the way it has to be. At this stage, his consciousness, for he begins as a rudimentary astral man and lands on our planet as a primitive physical man. His intelligence and consciousness will awaken only when his 4th principle, kama, that is desire, is matured and completed by its consecutive contact with the kamas, or energizing forces, of all the forms man has passed through in his previous 3 rounds. So we all have desire. We all have this need to express, to experience things. As we pointed out, even the universe, all of the Dhyan Chohans have desire, something that impels them to create, to do stuff. So it never ends. But what he's pointing out that there is no real karma to speak of until we reach this fourth round, fully formed as a human being. This is when we really are truly human, but we're animal human. We're not yet spiritual human. So desire is what propels us forward, causes us to experience everything we need to move forward towards that goal. The present mankind is at its fourth round of evolution. And here I am speaking of mankind as a genus, not as a race. The individual entities in them, the various races, are unconsciously to themselves performing their local earthly sevenfold cycles. Hence, the vast differences in the degrees of their intelligence and other qualities. Every individuality will be followed on its ascending arc by the law of retribution, karma, and death accordingly. So, as I pointed out, this is when we really are in the throes of karma, in this fourth round that we're in right now. The animals have very little karma to speak of. We, in one sense, this is kind of what I like to point out. Everything in the evolution of the world was absolutely spiritual and on track until humans came along. And while there were only plants and animals and minerals on the planet, there was no karma to speak of, almost none whatsoever. Everything was still very, very spiritual. Even when the first humans showed up, still very, very spiritual. It was only during the third round that we began evolving into these desireful individuals that we are now. And today we're in full bloom with desires. We desire all kinds of things.
And when we say today, we mean every human that current modern scientific history acknowledges. Every human, right, from the beginning, the first civilization that science acknowledges, we're talking about them as well. We have the same desire that the Aztecs had, the Incas. It's that long of a cycle, that long of a period. We are in the throes of free will and choice, making naughty choices and realizing the retribution of those choices, which Moria just said keeps us coming back again and again. The law of retribution, karma, and death accordingly. That doesn't happen in the animal world the same way. They just evolve naturally.
Right. I remember a conversation we had at the Logia España. Mm. We were giving a presentation years ago in Spanish in Los Angeles, and one of the people, attendees in the class, asked a question. His question was, do animals meditate? And it caught me off guard. I thought, I've never thought about that. But it didn't take me long to come up with the answer, and I think it's still correct. They have no need to meditate. They're already in touch with spirit. They're doing everything perfectly. There's nothing for them to meditate on. They live in the moment. They don't have calendars. They don't have agendas that they have to follow. They follow instinct. They perform their job perfectly, almost perfectly. And it's only when they interact with humans that we kind of distort that.
It's a very good insight into how that works.
So the perfect man, the entity which reached full perfection, each of his 7 principles being matured, will not be reborn here. His local terrestrial cycle is completed, and he will either proceed onward or be annihilated as an individuality. Now that sounds rather dramatic, doesn't it? A lot of people, when they first started studying Buddhism, talked about nirvana as being annihilation. You're being destroyed. Your individuality is going to be destroyed. Sounds awful, doesn't it? But only if you feel yourself as a separate individuality from spirit. Once you have attained enlightenment, you're fully aware of who you really are. So you lose absolutely nothing. But the false perception that you were ever a separate individuality disappears. So in that sense, that lower self is what is annihilated, not the bigger one. The incomplete entities, not yet perfect, have to be reincarnated. On their fifth round, after a partial nirvana, when the zenith of the grand cycle is reached, they will be held responsible. What I have said is the general rule, and obviously there are always exceptions. The Buddhas and avatars form the exception, as we actually still have some avatars left to us on Earth. Now, here's another intriguing thing. We still have a few avatars on Earth. And what is an avatar?
It's a physical representation of another spiritual being.
It's a divine incarnation, someone highly, highly evolved who chooses to be incarnated in a physical human body, because that's the best we have available on Earth, to do some kind of work. Now, who these are, I don't know, but it's intriguing that he mentioned that. All right, so that's...
Well, the masters are avatars in a sense.
They don't consider themselves as such. Remember in one of our early letters, K.H. was trying to explain to Siddha and Hume how to think of the Mahatmas. He said, if you think that we are gods or almost demigods, you're going to be sadly disappointed. He said, think of us as slightly more advanced than the rest of humanity, and you will be on good ground. You'll be in a safer, more realistic point of view. And then he made another statement. He said, we are not gods. And even our chiefs, they hope. So I take that to mean that he considers a, quote, God to be a Dhyan Chohan. So that is the highest level that anyone on this earth can reach. A few of them, the ones that we have now, as we pointed out, did not come from our own humanity. The highest we have, as far as we know, are Buddhas. And KH is on his way to becoming a Buddha. When that will happen, I have no idea, but hopefully we will be around when that happens.
If you're curious to read about this path of coming back into a body as potentially as an avatar or moving on, the last chapter in our book is called The Compassion of the Nirmanakayas, and that describes this end game where once you've finished, we don't specifically talk about the rounds as Morya is here, but once you and Terry and I, every one of us, have finished our earthly rotation, our process, our rounds, if you will, we do get to choose to move on elsewhere and continue our learning, or come back to Earth, usually in a physical body, maybe not, and stay around. And sometimes it's confusing. Are the masters those Nirmanakayas, or is it just the Dhyan Chohan, or is it the Buddha? That's where it gets a little bit vague, but there are so many levels of advancement, and where do these two portals occur? It's a little bit nebulous, but the point is, at some point, we go on, or stay around on the earth to help others as the masters are doing.
So the point is that this potentiality is relatively recent. The Buddha, Gautama, was the first of our humanity only 2,500 years ago. So that's really recent in anthropological time. That someone has reached it among our own humanity. Previously, all of the, and still today, all of the Dian Chohans had the same earthly human experience on some other system, not on this Earth, but on a different one. Maybe in this planetary system, maybe in a different one. All right, we are on the last question.
Question 7. The animal soul, having in six. By the way, all these questions were sent together, so it's not like Sinnett received an answer and then used that to formulate his next. He sent them all. So I bet they would have changed. They might have changed had he seen answers to previous questions. Question 7. This is the last thing in letter number 44. The animal soul, having in successive passages around the cycle lost, so to speak, the momentum which previously carried it past the divergent path downward, which veers off here, falls into the lower world, and the relatively brief cycle in which its individuality is dissipated. It's interesting, he says falls into the lower world. But this would only be the case with the animal soul which had not, in its union with spirit, developed a durable sixth principle. If it had done this, and if the sixth principle, drawing to itself the individuality of the complete man, had withered the inferior fifth principle by so doing, as the aloe's flower, when thrown up, withers its leaves, then the animal soul would not have cohesion enough to enter on another existence in a lower world, and would soon be dissipated in the sphere of this earth's attraction.
Now, when he refers to the flower of the aloe causing the withering of its leaves, this is not unusual. Any plant that produces fruit or a flower or something that requires an enormous amount of effort and energy to produce, it causes stress. It's no different from humans. When a woman is pregnant and is producing all of the energy necessary for that fetus to grow and develop and become a baby, it takes an enormous toll on her physically, emotionally, and mentally. And it's the same in everything in nature. It's doing the reproduction part, but it costs. And another analogy would be what HPB and all of the Chelas and the Mahatmas go through too. They are producing a spiritual child, so to speak, in the form of helping humanity, teaching them. And it costs an enormous amount of effort. And it's a great sacrifice on their part. They could just do it for themselves, supposedly, and just go on as quickly as possible. But they choose not to. They choose to help struggling orphan humanity also achieve with them. We don't leave people behind. We bring everyone along with us. Every time one single individual achieves a level of spiritual awakening, that affects the entire world. Every single human being comes along, even imperceptibly, and they don't realize it, they're not aware of it, but it still brings them along. In the 5th and 6th and 7th rounds, it gets easier and easier and easier because of all the previous work that has been done. And we're in the very most difficult part of the cycle. So this struggle, as difficult as it is absolutely essential, and it's absolutely worthwhile. Reforming your conceptions on what I gave you above, you will understand better now. The whole individuality is centered in the three middle, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th principles. So that would be astral, desire, the lower mental, and the higher mental. During earthly life, it is all in the 4th, desire, the center of energy, volition, will, Mr. Hume has perfectly defined the difference between personality and individuality. The former hardly survives, meaning the personality. When a person dies, it's the personality that dies, not the individuality. The latter, to run successfully its sevenfold downward and upward course, has to assimilate to itself the eternal life power residing only in the seventh, spirit, and then blend the three, fourth, fifth, and seventh, so the desire, the lower mental, and spirit into one, the sixth, which is buddhi. Those who succeed in doing so become Buddhas, Dhyan Shohans, etc. The chief object of our struggles and initiations is to achieve this union while yet on this earth. So that's our goal. In our book, we talk about what is our goal as humans, and that's exactly it, to become enlightened, to become Buddhas and Dhyan Shohans. Those who will be successful have nothing to fear during the fifth, sixth, and seventh rounds. But this is a mystery. Always a mystery here. Our beloved KH is on his way to the goal, the highest of all beyond, as well as upon this sphere. So KH is an amazing individual, even among the Mahatmas. Remember, at this point, he's only been an adept for about 27 years, and yet he obviously did some preparatory work in previous lifetimes that put him on a really rapid upward trajectory to becoming not only a Buddha, but most likely a Dhyan Shohan before too long.
I was under the impression that Moria was his senior, was more of like a superior, but it doesn't seem that way.
And as I've said before, they are part of a team.
Right.
So when one succeeds, they all succeed.
Right.
And whether one succeeds relatively shortly after that, it doesn't matter. They're all working together. The first one, the Buddha, Gautama, who did succeed first, had enormous support from thousands of other individuals that were working along with him. And many people achieved nirvana at the same time. Not necessarily to become Buddhas, and yet there were obviously some other Buddhas that have come along. But no one is left behind. We're all helping each other. So when one succeeds, we all succeed. He says, now just to end this letter, I have to thank you for all you have done for our two friends, meaning HPB and Olcott. It is a debt of gratitude we owe you. And then he signs an M. And then he adds a little note. For some short time, you will not hear of or from me. And then in all caps, prepare, and he underlines it. What that means, I don't know. But that's the end of the very interesting segment on the cosmological notes that, as we've said before, was really the outline of the second volume of The Secret Doctrine. So if you've gotten anything at all from this, that's all you need, just a general conception, because this is not going to teach you how to become a Mahatma. Too many people get wrapped up in the doctrine, in the philosophy, and they go round and round and argue and discuss, and
They get bogged down. They get
bogged down.
It's cool to study, but is it practical? A little bit practical. It helps you understand how life works, but We have other teachings that are way more practical that'll help us get to become a Mahatma faster than learning the cosmological processes.
And as we've pointed out before, the expected third volume of The Secret Doctrine was supposed to be the practical application, which we assumed was going to include a lot of Raja Yoga along with other suggestions and advice. But that was never produced because...
Where do we hear about that? Where is it? Where is the third volume even mentioned?
It is mentioned at the very end of Volume 2 of The Secret Doctrine. And what she said, and maybe we'll read it one day, is that whether or not that appears is going to depend on the reception of the first two volumes, which were produced at the same time, Volumes 1 and 2. And she said, depending on how people receive that and whether or not they take advantage of that, will determine whether or not this third and fourth volume, because there was going to be actually 4 total, and neither one of them was produced. So I'm assuming that means that they decided that was more than enough for humanity at that point in time, and that the third volume would have to wait. And who knows? Maybe some of us can participate in the production of that third volume at some point.
In the meantime, the first and second chapters of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and half of the third chapter, we think are extremely practical, and in order to help us become advanced humans. So
that has been our goal from the beginning of our collaboration in teaching, is how do we take these teachings and put them into practice in our daily lives? So now let's talk about something practical.
We mentioned last session that we want to offer a segment on actual practical spiritual practice, since a lot of our material from the Mahatma letters is theoretical and study worthy. And you've heard a lot from us about Raja Yoga and about Eckhart Tolle and about our book and how these teachings can be made everyday usable, practical. And so today what we want to share is just something very, very simple and very appropriate. The concept of what do we do in life when things get crazy around us and things get dramatic. And by the way, this is very, very, very yogic. Yoga, in its basic sense, it means connecting with something deeper inside of you, union. The word yoga means union. But how do we do that if we're being assaulted, as Patanjali, as I.K. Taimni actually says, one of our favorite translators of the sutras? We're being assaulted by this push and pull back and forth of the world. It could be referred to as the pairs of opposites, going out to your work and then coming home, getting excited and getting disappointed, pushing up against resistance of any kind and then being attracted to it and being repelled by it, whether it's something physical or something mental. Pairs of opposites exist all around us. And what do we do when it gets wild out there? It does. Just traffic. Take traffic for an example, or take a flat tire for an example, or any situation in life where things get crazy. What do we do? That is one of the most basic lessons to learn on our path to become Buddhas. And I know it sounds a little bit strange, but that's really it. If we have short fuses and lose our temper all the time, we're not progressing. We're becoming stagnant and we're not learning lessons. So what do we do when things get crazy? Before I give the answer, anything else to say about the technique?
No, I'm waiting to find out what you're going to share here. I need to learn myself.
Yeah. Now, of course, it's not a magic pill. It takes work. And we would never proclaim that our answers are the only answers and the right ones. These are answers. They work. Other things work too. So if you've ever taken a yoga class, the teacher probably talks about breathing. And there you go. In the midst of a chaotic, tumultuous conflict maybe that you're having, are you breathing? What if you stopped fighting for a second, or even maybe before you start throwing the first metaphorical punch, what if you did just lower the shoulders and just take a slow inhale through your nose? What if you did that? And what if you did keep your eyes closed for 2 more seconds, literally 2 seconds, and did a long exhale? Then you open your eyes and you think, oh, this human being in front of me doesn't deserve to have my fist in its face because I just took a breath. It really is that simple. I'm generalizing and I'm being a little humorous, but the breath is such a key factor in staying present and staying calm rather than seeing red sometimes or getting your jugular vein pumping because you're so mad at traffic that's conspiring against you to make you late, or the coworker that steals your recognition for the job you know you did. If you breathe, you can see the situation a little bit more clearly. It's not a magic pill, like I said, but it starts to help. Stay calm at all costs. Be the peace which passeth understanding, and you can handle anything. We're going to take lifetimes to learn this, but why not start working on it now? Just play a game with yourself like I used to do in traffic. Just ask yourself when you get mad, ask yourself, before you get mad, or when you're about to get mad, ask yourself, how long am I willing to stay mad about this? And of course, you're going to end your anger streak immediately if you got mad at traffic, because you're going to chuckle and laugh. And then you'll realize, wow, I can breathe and stay a little bit more calm. You can think of yourself as the eye of a hurricane, because hurricanes move and hurricanes bump into land. They go over land, they gain strength, they lose strength, but the eye is always calm. You can be that eye. It's challenging though. You're going to get tested, but staying calm is the key. And how to stay calm, the breath is one of the best ways to do it. Sit tall, lower the shoulders, maybe just stop for just 10 seconds and take 2 breaths. Feel better, exhale, 1 more. And then there are other things you can do. You can also recite a little short mantra. I am cool, calm, and collected. I am cool, calm, and collected. Something like that over and over again. Or you can say, I got this, I got this, I got this. And then believe it. So many little things to do, and Terry will have some more, but staying calm, that's it. How do you do it? Breathe, right? What else is there?
Didn't Eckhart Tolle say something about the word Atma?
Yes.
What did he say?
He says that, funny enough, the German word for breath is very similar to that word, and it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's Atman.
Well, that's one form
Atman.
of it's Sanskrit has different endings depending on how the word is used.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's equivalent to breath.
Yes, exactly. Spirit. Remind yourself of who you really are. You're not this personality that is having a temper tantrum right now. You are something much higher than that. So it's awareness. That's what you're pointing out.
Yes.
Become aware of who you really are. And when we do that, everything falls into place. It becomes easy. We're 2 days away from the 4th of July in the United States, which is kind of an important holiday for us.
Yeah.
The 248th anniversary of our independence and our experiment as the longest current existing democracy on earth. We are in the midst of an election cycle that's kind of interesting. I guess kind of interesting is putting it mildly. But we've mentioned before that the Mahatmas never get too riled up about anything. They might have a little flare-up for a little while, but that's about it. They just don't worry about things. Anything in the outer world, what is it that we say? It's exactly as it should be. Everything is exactly as it should be. People push back on that. How could it be? How can you say that? Of course, it's not the way it's supposed to be. But guess what? It is. And why is that?
We're all learning our lessons at our own pace, and people make choices. You can't stop that. We can try to educate and help, but you're not going to stop people from making bad decisions.
The state of things in the world today is the result of the combined karma of every single person living and waiting to be incarnated. That is what determines the situation that we live in today. How could it be anything else? It's nature in action. That's how nature works. We create the results, and we get to live and experience those results. That's how we learn. So that's why the Mahatmas never, ever get concerned about anything.
Let me interject there and say you're probably thinking that, okay, that being apathetic or non-caring or not with lack of compassion. What's the opposite of compassionate? Discompassionate?
Selfish, maybe?
Selfish. You might be thinking that when we say that they don't worry, that's not at all what we're saying. You can have tremendous compassion and concern and care without worrying. Now, these are just semantics and these are words. Think about what worry does to the worrier, to the doer of the worry. It causes us problems. Can you not offer tremendous help in a horrific situation without worrying? Could you? Not for most people we couldn't, but it's possible. It's possible to step into a literal war zone and do something mindfully. Help, if you're a medic, help the person that needs your attention without freaking out, without getting too crazy yourself. That's what we're talking about. You can do work. You can even plan for the future in the present moment. You can handle a really tough situation mindfully. You can do it fast if your attention is required fast. If someone's in danger, you can do it without worrying. The Dalai Lama, let's say his quote. He said the best thing about this.
Yes.
You say it better than I do, though, about.
He was being interviewed by a very famous newscaster, a female. I forgot if it was Connie Chung or who it was.
Connie Chung.
But it was after a terrible earthquake in Tibet. And she said, how do you handle that when so many people are suffering? And he thought for a moment. He said, I always remember what a teacher told me. If you can do something to change it, act. If you can't, don't worry. It was that simple. That was the advice. If you can change the situation, do it. Get on it. And if there's nothing you can do, then worrying is not going to help.
This is a huge technique to learn on your journey to becoming enlightened.
Yes, it is.
You don't want to do this. I know you don't. I know if you're a vegan, you don't want to think about cows being slaughtered in slaughterhouses, right? You don't want to think about that. I know it makes you uncomfortable. Can you do something about it? And if you can, do it without too much crazy emotion. And if you can't effectively help, you're going to cause yourself stress? Are you going to cause yourself...
Yeah.
Are you willing to cause yourself problems?
So just to sum up, in the current situation, whatever happens with America, we've been through all kinds of things. We've been through the Revolutionary War. We've been through the Civil War. We've been through other wars with other countries. And guess what? We survived all of them. So whatever happens in the future, it's all going to be a learning experience for all of us. And what the masters will do, I always ask myself, what would the masters do in this situation? And the answer is, if they can influence people in the right direction along with nature, then they will. They will do whatever they can to send out positive, reinforcing thoughts and energy to people that they think have the potential of changing things. And if that doesn't change anything, then they don't worry about it.
They're the most patient people on earth.
And they know. That's why they've attained their level of enlightenment and why we hope to achieve that same level of enlightenment. So we have to figure out how did they do it, and then we simply follow their example. So that's it. Don't worry, be happy.
All right. Until next time, Thank you
Yes.
for being with us. As always, please make comments if you would like to ask questions or share something.
We're on a journey here, and we appreciate you coming along.
Namaste.